The wind screamed across the rocky slopes of Mount Moriah, carrying with it the faint scent of burning earth. Abraham's footsteps echoed against the stones, each one slower, heavier, as if the mountain itself resisted his climb. Beside him walked his son, his only son Isaac, the child promised by God after decades of longing. The boy's voice was steady, but his words pierced the stillness. "My father, we have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb?" High above, unseen by mortal eyes, a battle of wills raged in the spirit realm. Angels watched in tense silence. Demonic forces whispered in the shadows, their leader cloaked in fury. For Lucifer, this was no ordinary act of faith. It was a threat. If Abraham obeyed, if he did not falter, a divine chain reaction would begin, one that would set in motion the plan of salvation itself. And that, above all, was what Lucifer feared. Decades earlier, Abraham had been called out of Ur, a thriving center of ancient Mesopotamia. There, idols crowded every household, and gods were carved from stone and gold. Yet into this polytheistic world came a voice unlike any other, a voice that was not bound to a temple or statue. This was the voice of the Most High, calling Abraham to leave everything and go to a land that would be shown to him. The promise was staggering. Abraham would become the father of a great nation. His descendants would be as countless as the stars, and through them, all nations of the earth would be blessed. Heaven understood the gravity of this covenant. It was not simply about land or lineage. It was about creating a bloodline through which God himself would one day enter human history. In the realm of darkness, this was received as an act of war. Lucifer had long known that God's plan involved humanity's redemption. But now, the promise to Abraham drew a direct line toward a coming Messiah. Every child born to Abraham's line became a target. And Isaac, the miracle child of Sarah's old age, was the key. When the command came, it was like a bolt of lightning in the night. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about." The wording was deliberate, "your only son, whom you love." This was not an abstract sacrifice, it was personal. The journey would take 3 days, a span in which doubt could fester and reason could rebel. But Abraham moved without hesitation, rising early in the morning, saddling his donkey, and splitting the wood for the burnt offering. In the spiritual realm, angels followed at a distance, watching the obedience unfold. Lucifer, however, was restless. He had accused humanity for ages, claiming they would never remain faithful under true testing. If Abraham failed, the covenant would weaken. If Abraham succeeded, the foundation for God's redemptive plan would be cemented in history. The stakes could not have been higher. The journey to Moriah cut through ancient trade routes and rugged hills. Merchants passed with caravans of spices and fabrics, unaware that history was shifting under their feet. Isaac, now a young man rather than a child, carried the wood upon his back, foreshadowing another son who would carry the wood of his own execution centuries later. At night, Abraham looked to the stars, the same stars God had told him would mirror the number of his descendants. Each one glimmered like a silent witness to the covenant. But with every step closer to Moriah, the weight of the command pressed heavier on his heart. In the unseen realm, Lucifer whispered lies, trying to erode Abraham's resolve. This God is cruel. He gives and then takes away. Why follow a promise that ends in ashes? But the patriarch's mind was fixed. Somewhere deep within, Abraham trusted that God could even raise the dead. It was this unshakable faith that made the enemy tremble. When they reached the foot of Moriah, Abraham told the servants to remain behind. "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there to worship. Then we will come back to you." Notice the plural, "we will come back." It was a quiet declaration of faith, a coded defiance against the shadow of death. The climb was steep. Loose stones slid underfoot. Above them the summit waited, crowned with jagged rock where an altar would soon be built. Isaac's question about the missing lamb hung in the air like smoke. Abraham's reply was both an answer and a prophecy. God himself will provide the lamb. In the spirit world, this statement rippled like a shockwave. For Lucifer, it was a reminder of an ancient prophecy he could not erase, that one day God himself would come as the lamb to undo the curse of sin. The altar was built with deliberate care. Stones were placed one upon another, wood arranged atop them. Isaac, in an act of trust as remarkable as his father's, allowed himself to be bound. There was no record of a struggle, only the solemn understanding that something sacred was unfolding. Abraham's hand rose, the knife catching the sunlight. Heaven held its breath. And then the voice came, sharp and urgent, "Abraham, Abraham, do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." At that instant a ram appeared, caught by its horns in a thicket. It was the provision Abraham had spoken of, the substitute. Isaac was released, and the ram was offered in his place. On that mountain, the covenant was confirmed, and Abraham named the place Yahweh Yireh, the Lord will provide. For Lucifer, this was a defeat more bitter than the loss of any battle. He had watched for centuries, seeking to derail God's plan by corrupting humanity's loyalty. But here, on Moriah, he saw a mortal man defy his whispers and prove that faith could stand even when the cost was unimaginable. Worse still, the imagery of the event would echo into the future. A beloved son carrying wood up a hill, a willing sacrifice, a substitute provided at the last moment. This was not just an isolated act, it was a prophetic shadow of the Messiah to come. And if the pattern was being set in stone, then so too was the inevitable crushing of the serpent's head. After Moriah, the covenant blessings were repeated with greater force. Abraham's descendants would possess the gates of their enemies. Through his seed all nations would be blessed. This meant that the bloodline leading to the Messiah was now unbreakable. Every generation from Isaac onward carried the seal of Moriah's obedience. Lucifer understood the implications. He had lost the chance to fracture the covenant at its most vulnerable point. From this moment on, his strategy would shift, from breaking the promise to corrupting the people who carried it. The centuries ahead would be filled with wars, idol worship, exile, and persecution. But the seed remained intact. The events on Moriah became a cornerstone of biblical symbolism. Jewish tradition looked to the mountain as a place of divine provision. Centuries later, the Temple of Solomon would rise on that same ridge, and sacrifices would be offered daily as reminders of God's holiness. For Christians, the parallels were unmistakable. Jesus of Nazareth, also a promised son, would walk toward his own place of sacrifice just outside those ancient walls. Like Isaac, he would carry the wood of the altar, this time in the form of a cross. But unlike Isaac, there would be no ram to take his place. He would be the lamb, willingly slain for the sins of the world. Lucifer had feared Moriah because it locked the plan in motion. Once Abraham proved faithful, the Messiah's coming was inevitable. And when the Messiah came, the enemy's dominion over humanity would be shattered. To this day, the story of Abraham and Isaac resonates across faiths. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all hold it as sacred. But beneath the layers of tradition lies the deeper truth. This was not merely a test of one man's obedience. It was a declaration of war against the spiritual forces that sought to keep humanity in darkness. Moriah was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of the end for the enemy. On that mountain, God revealed that his plan would be carried out through faith, obedience, and divine provision. And for Lucifer, that revelation was the one thing he could never undo. As the sun set over Moriah, the mountain stood silent. The altar was cold, the smoke gone. But in the heavens, the countdown had begun, toward a day when another sun would climb another hill, and the world would never be the same. You've just uncovered another hidden chapter of history with animated Bible mysteries. If you enjoyed this journey, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story where the Bible's words, ancient legends, and divine mysteries come together. Until next time, heaven holds the secrets. Never stop searching.